in 1980, Bobby Shafran was on his way up to Sullivan County Community College, which is 2 hours outside of New York City, to begin his freshman year, and began walking across the lawn towards the dorm building. On his walk over, he felt like all these random strangers on the lawn were looking at him like they knew him. And just a couple of minutes after being inside of his dorm room, he hears a knock on the door, and there's another student, and this guy, his face just drains of color, and he starts shaking when he sees Bobby. "Were you adopted?" "Yeah." And then the student said, "Is your birthday July 12th? And Bobby said, "Yeah." And so the student goes, "My name is Michael, and I am best friends with a guy named Eddie Galland, and you are his clone." And so ultimately, Eddie invited Bobby and Michael to come to his house, and right as Bobby is about to knock on the door, it flies open, and standing in front of Bobby is his exact clone. They are definitely identical twins, and they both immediately saw that. And so Newsday printed this totally heartwarming fairy tale story. Friends of another young man living in the New York area named David Kellman began telling David that he had to check out this Newsday article about these long-lost twins because these two twins look exactly like David. And so David called Eddie's home phone number. So Eddie and Bobby went to David's house, and as soon as they walked in and saw David, they knew right away he was one of them. So the boys' adoptive parents reached out to the adoption agency, which was Louise Wise Services, and they say, "Did you separate our sons at birth on purpose?" And one of the executives said, "Yes, we did, because it's really hard to place 3 children into one home." They felt like the agency was actually lying to them about why they had separated their sons in the first place. And at some point, the boys actually went into business together and opened their own restaurant in New York called Triplets. The brothers started to fight with each other about how to run the restaurant. And so at some point, Bobby left the business. And apparently his departure just completely ruined the dynamic of the 3 brothers. And so Eddie started showing signs of severe depression and was ultimately hospitalized for 3 weeks. And then shortly after getting out of the hospital, he took his own life. Around this time, a journalist named Lawrence Wright found an obscure scientific article called Psychoanalytic Study of the Child. It detailed a New York-based study about identical twins that were intentionally separated at birth. All the babies that had been used in the study came from the same adoption agency, the Louise Wise Services in New York. And so Lawrence called Bobby and told him that based on this article, it seems like he and his brothers were used in a scientific study. The guy in charge of the actual scientific study was this doctor named Peter Neubauer, who was this very well-known psychologist, but the doctor basically said, "I won't answer any of your questions," and he never published his findings. In the recent documentary called 3 Identical Strangers, Dr. Neubauer's personal assistant, a woman by the name of Natasha Josefowitz, she was interviewed, and she said the point of the study was to finally put to bed whether it was nature or nurture that made the person who they ultimately become. And she said the results were incredible, that basically it has nothing to do with nurture, it's all about your genetic makeup. This study was ultimately shut down permanently in 1980.